You are in the shower, hot water, door closed, no one sees you, no one hears you. It is perhaps the only moment of the day when you are truly alone. And even so, your mind does not stop. You are rehearsing the answer you are going to give in a meeting that has not even started yet. You are mentally going over what you need to deliver before 6. You are calculating whether there is time to solve 3 things during the lunch break. The steam rises, the water runs down, and you are not there. Your body is under the shower, but your mind has already left, has already gotten dressed, is already on the street, is already late. You cannot be present even in the only place in the house where there is no demand at all. And when you turn off the water and dry yourself, a familiar sensation appears. The day has already started without you. Not because something happened, but because the list of things that need to happen is already running before you step outside the bathroom. This is not stress. It is not clinical anxiety. It is not lack of planning. It is something deeper. It is the constant sensation that time slips through your fingers even when you are doing everything right, even when the schedule is organized, even when you went to bed early, even when technically there is no emergency at all. You never have time, and the explanation for that is older than you imagine. This is not your problem. It is not a personal failure. It is not what happens when someone does not know how to prioritize. Look around. Your coworkers say the same thing. Your friends cancel plans for the same reason. Your parents, who theoretically have fewer obligations, also complain that the day does not fit. 10-year-old children already say they are busy. Retirees feel guilty for doing nothing. Time has become a universal debt and everyone is in the red. You talk to someone and ask, "How are you?" The answer is almost never an emotional state. It is an activity report. "I'm in a rush. I'm going crazy. I've got a lot going on." No one says, "I am calm," without a tone of justification. As if calmness needed an explanation, as if being at peace were a temporary failure that will soon be corrected by the next flood of commitments. This sensation that the day does not fit is not individual. It is generational. It is structural. It is the background sound of an entire civilization operating under a logic that no one asked for, but everyone obeys. Now observe more closely, not what you do, but how time behaves when you try to use it. You sit down to work. You need concentration. You open the document. You begin. 40 seconds later, something interrupts. It does not matter what. A message, a reminder, an idea that appears about another task. You handle the interruption. You return to the document. You reread the last paragraph. You try to resume. 30 seconds. Another interruption. Even smaller, almost invisible, but enough to break the thread. You reread again. You restart. And this dance repeats for hours. At the end of the day, the document is there, more or less done, but you spent 4 hours on what required one. Not because you are incompetent, but because the present was sliced into intervals so short that continuity became impossible. And the worst part, no one recognizes this shattered time as lost time, because in each fragment, you were doing something, responding, checking, updating, reacting. The entire day is filled. Every minute has an occupation, but no hour has depth. Think about the weekend. Saturday morning, theoretically free. You wake up without an alarm. And what happens? The mind begins to assemble a list. Not the practical list, the existential list. What should I be doing? What am I wasting? Who is already doing more than me at this exact moment? The guilt of not producing settles in before breakfast. And rest, which should be the absence of demand, becomes just another task to be optimized. You rest strategically. You take a calculated break to perform more later. Even idleness has been colonized by the logic of performance. And when you finally try to stop for real, without justification, without purpose, without planned return, what appears is not peace. It is a strange discomfort, a restlessness that has no name, as if silence were wrong, as if every second standing still were a second stolen from something you should be doing, even if you do not know what. Now think about this. If the problem were personal, if it were a matter of discipline, method, morning routine, or productivity app, the solution would have already worked. There are thousands of books, courses, videos, and techniques promising to return control over time. And you have probably already tried some, and they worked for 1 week, maybe 2. Then the same sensation returned. The day does not fit, time slips away, and the race begins again. The reason why no technique truly solves it is that the problem is not in your method, it is in the structure of the world you inhabit. And this is not a new diagnosis. More than 2,000 years ago, a Roman philosopher looked at the most powerful elite of the ancient world: senators, generals, aristocrats with slaves, fortunes, and absolute power, and saw the same thing you feel every Monday morning: people with everything, except time. His name was Seneca, and what he wrote about the shortness of life is one of the most precise diagnoses ever made about the world you live in now. The question is not how to gain more time. The question is to understand why your time stopped being yours, and when exactly that happened. Lucius Annaeus Seneca was born around the year 4 before Christ in what is today the south of Spain, then part of the Roman Empire. He grew up in Rome. He became one of the greatest orators, philosophers, and statesmen of his time. He accumulated an absurd fortune. He was an advisor to emperors. He survived exiles, conspiracies, and the madness of Nero. And in the middle of all this, he wrote treatises that did not try to impress. They tried to wake people up. The most well-known of them is De Brevitate Vitae, on the shortness of life. A short text, direct, without concessions, and with a thesis that should be engraved on the wall of every modern office. The thesis is this: life is not short. We are the ones who make it short. But this sentence, which became a decorative quote on social media, hides something more disturbing when you read the entire argument. Seneca was not pointing the finger at the lazy. He was not talking about those who stand still doing nothing. On the contrary, he was aiming at the busy, at the hyper-productive, at those who filled every hour of the day with commitments, obligations, social appearances, endless tasks. He said that these people, the busiest in imperial Rome, were precisely the ones who wasted life the most, because they were busy with things they did not choose, because a full schedule was not a sign of a rich life, but of a kidnapped life. And he made a distinction that is the key to everything. There is a difference between being busy and being alive. Rome in the 1st century had its own version of social overexposure. The client system forced citizens to visit patrons every morning, not out of necessity, but for visibility. Not showing up was disappearing from the network of favors, alliances, and recognition. Senators attended banquets not for the food, but for the record. Being seen in the right place with the right people was the currency that bought relevance. Roman public life was, in essence, an analog reputation platform. And Seneca saw all of this with the coldness of someone who recognizes a machine in operation. He did not say, "Stop." He did not offer technique. He did not promise freedom. He said, "Observe. Observe where your time goes. Observe who decides what you do with it. Observe the difference between the time you live and the time that merely passes through you." 2,000 years later, the observation remains. What changed was the scale and the impossibility of escape. Let us dismantle the mechanism slowly, piece by piece, because it was designed to be invisible. Think about any Tuesday. You are at work. Someone asks for something by message. It is not urgent, but you respond in 3 minutes. Why? Because taking longer seems careless. It seems like a lack of commitment. It seems like you are not there. And not being there has become the professional equivalent of a silent infraction. No one verbalizes this. No code of conduct says, respond in less than 5 minutes. But everyone feels the pressure. Everyone knows that the speed of the response is read as a measure of commitment, not the content of the response, the speed. Now extrapolate this to the entire day. Every quick response is a small proof of presence. Every completed and signaled task is a record of activity. Every participation in a meeting, even when unnecessary, is a mark of institutional existence. You are not just working. You are demonstrating that you are working. And the demonstration consumes as much time as the work itself, sometimes more. Seneca had a precise observation about this. He described the Romans who spent their entire lives in the antechamber of powerful men, waiting for audiences that might not happen. Hours of waiting, days of preparation for a meeting of minutes. And these people considered themselves busy. They considered themselves important. Because waiting, in the Roman context, was a form of participation in the social game. Being in the antechamber was better than being at home, because being in the antechamber meant that you belonged to the system. Today, the antechamber is permanent. You are always waiting for something: the client's response, the boss's feedback, the colleague's confirmation, the project result. And while you wait, you do not rest. You fill the interval with other micro-activities. You respond to another message. You check another channel. You open another tab. Modern waiting is not idle. It is filled, but it is still waiting. It is still time spent not on what matters to you, but on what the system requires you to monitor to prove that you are still inside it. And this generates an effect that Seneca named with surgical precision, life passes being preparation for life. You organize, plan, respond, schedule, confirm, signal, and when you look back, you realize that the entire day was spent serving the flow, not living, maintaining the flow. You are not paid only to work, you are paid to be available, and availability has no schedule. The email arrives at 11 at night. The work group message appears on Sunday. You are not obligated to respond, but you know it will be noticed if you do not. That absence will have a cost that no one will name, but everyone will account for. The system does not need a foreman. It only needs absence to have a social price. Seneca saw this in the clients who visited patrons at dawn. No one forced them, but not going meant excluding yourself from the network. The structure is identical. The address has changed. Permanent availability is not a sign of commitment. It is the silent tax the system charges so that you continue belonging. And you pay. Every day, without contract, without awareness, without realizing that this is the central mechanism of confiscation. Say out loud, I have nothing to do today. Notice what happens in the body. The immediate discomfort, the almost reflexive need to add a justification, an exception, a remark. Because emptiness stopped being a pause and became a diagnosis of irrelevance. An empty schedule is not read as freedom. It is read as a sign that no one needs you. And no one wants that signal circulating. Seneca wrote that men flee from themselves by filling the day with distractions, because confronting one's own emptiness requires a courage that almost no one has. The contemporary system solved this problem with brutal elegance. It offers infinite filling at any hour, in any place. You never need to face silence. The price is never facing yourself. And an identity built on permanent occupation only exists while the occupation lasts. Try to remember clearly what you did yesterday between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. Not in general, in the details. Most people cannot. Not because the moment did not exist, but because it was not lived with enough continuity to become real memory. The modern present is a sequence of micro-interruptions so dense that no instant lasts long enough to settle as experience. Seneca wrote that most men act as if they had all the time in the world, but reach the end without having lived a single entire day for real. The diagnosis today is even more precise. It is not the entire day that escapes. It is the hour. It is the block of 40 minutes. It is the 20 seconds of full attention that never arrive because there is always a signal, a notification, an external stimulus arriving first. Reaction is not life. It is service provided to a system that needs your attention to function. Now we go down one more level, because the mechanism has a gear that Seneca sensed, but that only the contemporary world made inescapable. There is a difference between using time and displaying the use of time. And this difference defines the era you live in. Think about a professional who spends 3 hours concentrated in silence, solving a complex problem, without interruption, without record, without communicating to anyone what they are doing. At the end of the 3 hours, the problem is solved. Now think about another professional who spent the same 3 hours in meetings, responding to messages, participating in calls, updating status spreadsheets. At the end of the 3 hours, nothing was solved. But everyone saw that he was busy. Which one is considered more productive in the current system? You know the answer. And it reveals the entire logic. The system does not measure production. It measures visibility of activity. It does not matter what you did. What matters is what was perceived as having been done. Invisible work, deep thinking, solitary concentration, silent resolution does not generate social signal. And what does not generate social signal in the regime of overexposure is equivalent to not having been done. This extends beyond work. You traveled and did not post? It is as if you had not traveled. You read a book and did not comment about it? The experience feels incomplete, as if the layer of external validation were missing. You spent a weekend at home cooking, reading, sleeping without recording anything? In the language of the system, that weekend did not exist. Social overexposure created a second parallel existence, the documented existence. And this second existence began to consume the first. Because documenting requires time, it requires attention. It requires that you step out of the experience to record it. It requires that, in the middle of dinner, you think about how that moment will be perceived by those who are not there. And this constant division between living and recording is where time is truly lost. Not in great wastes, in the micro shifts of attention that happen hundreds of times a day, each one so small that it seems insignificant, but whose sum is the difference between a lived day and a day merely documented. Seneca wrote one of the most brutal sentences of his treatise when he addressed Paulinus. You postpone life, and meanwhile it passes. Not, life is short. Life passes while you postpone living it, while you prepare, while you organize, while you demonstrate. Postponement is not procrastination. It is the structure of daily life. You do not postpone life because you are lazy. You postpone life because between you and life, there is an endless layer of micro-obligations that present themselves as necessary, but that in fact are only the cost of remaining within a system that cannot allow you to stop. And there is a final irony that Seneca would capture with one sentence if he were here. The same instruments that promise to free time, technology, automation, instant connection, productivity tools, are the ones that consume it the most. Each tool that promises efficiency generates a new layer of demand. Each communication channel that promises speed generates a new expectation of response. Each platform that promises connection generates a new space where you need to exist, update, perform. The promise was, with this, you will have more time. The result was, with this, more places appeared where your time is required. The mechanism feeds itself. More tools, more channels, more demands, more sensation of lack of time, more search for tools that solve the lack of time, which generate more channels, which generate more demands. You are running inside a wheel, and the wheel does not stop because it was not designed to stop. It was designed to spin, and to make you believe that you need to run faster. Here is what really happened, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You do not lack time. You have an excess of compulsory presence. Every minute of your day is occupied not because there is too much work, but because there is too much visibility. The system requires that you be present in multiple spaces simultaneously: work, networks, groups, channels, platforms, and each space charges a fee of continuous attention. None of these fees in isolation is absurd. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, a quick check, a brief response. But the sum of these reasonable fees is an entire life delivered to a flow that is not yours. Lack of time is a product, not a failure. The system needs you to feel that you do not have time, because a person without time does not question, does not reflect, does not stop to notice that most of the things they ran for that day were not theirs. They belong to the flow. They belong to others' expectations. They belong to the structural need to remain visible in order to remain relevant. Seneca wrote that men protect their property with miserliness, but give time to anyone who asks for it, and that this is the most shameful paradox of the human condition, because money can be recovered, time cannot. And even so, it is time that is given for free, without resistance, without indignation, without even realizing that it is being given. 2 millennia later, the diagnosis not only remains accurate, it has become industrial. Time is no longer requested by Roman patrons in marble antechambers. It is extracted by digital systems designed to capture attention on a planetary scale. The difference is not of nature, it is of power. The mechanism is the same. The machine is what became incomparably larger. And the most uncomfortable discovery is this: when existing socially and proving that one exists socially become the same operation, time does not disappear by accident. It is consumed as raw material. And what is produced with it is not your life. It is the continuous record of a life that no one had time to live. Now put the pieces together. What once seemed like laziness or poor management now has another name, another address, another scale. It is not that you spend time badly. It is that time was converted into currency of social permanence. Every minute in which you respond, update, signal, and participate is a minute delivered to the system in exchange for belonging. And every minute in which you exist without record, without audience, without visible production, is a minute in which the system loses fuel. and you glimpse for an instant what it means to be alive without being on display. Seneca did not use these words, but the diagnosis was identical. The Romans he observed were not idle, they were extremely busy, and they died without having lived, because they lived for the flow, for the schedule, for the appearance, for the recognition that they were there, not for the experience of being there. The difference between the two is everything, and it is invisible to those who are inside. What is called lack of time is, in fact, a diagnosis disguised as a daily complaint. It is not that the day shrank. It is that the day was colonized by a system that transformed every available interval into yet another surface of mandatory visibility. Every pause that could be silence became a checking window. Every space that could be emptiness became an opportunity for documented presence. And the most precise part of the Senecan diagnosis is that it does not spare even those who know this. You can understand the entire mechanism. You can name every gear, identify every extraction, and still catch yourself responding to messages at 11 at night, not out of ignorance. Because of something harder to name, the social cost of leaving the flow is real, immediate and concrete. The benefit of leaving the flow is abstract, slow, and silent. The system was designed to make this equation permanently unfavorable to those who want to pause. Seneca looked at Rome and saw extremely rich aristocrats behaving like slaves to their own calendar. He found it absurd, and it was. But the aristocrats did not see it, because when everyone lives like this, the absurd becomes the norm. The norm becomes identity, and when the absurd becomes identity, questioning it seems like madness. There is no villain in this story. There is no conspiracy. There is something harder to fight, an atmospheric structure, a climate that one breathes, a silent consensus that time must be filled, that occupation is virtue, that speed is character, and that whoever stops is falling behind. There is a passage in Seneca in which he writes something that should be reread every day. He says that life, looked at backward, seems to have passed in an instant, that people reach the end and realize that they were busy their entire lives, but do not remember with what. That time passed by them, not through them. This was written in a world without electricity, without a wristwatch, without a digital calendar, in a world where, theoretically, there was enough silence to live. Now imagine what he would write about your world, a world where silence was filled, where emptiness was colonized, where even sleep became trackable data, a world where every second is disputed by systems that need your attention to survive. The question that remains is not how to recover time. Any answer to that question will only be another tool that will fill more space, create more demand, consume more attention. The question is simpler and more brutal. When was the last time you spent an entire hour doing nothing, without producing, without responding, without recording, without justifying your existence to anyone, and felt that that hour was enough, that you were enough, that being there, in silence, without witness, without signal, was enough? If you do not remember, perhaps the most honest answer is not a forgotten memory. Perhaps it is that the world made that hour literally unbearable, and that you learned to call that unbearability productivity. Seneca did not offer a method. He did not promise a solution. He did not sell steps to reclaim time. He did something rarer and more uncomfortable. He showed the mechanism, and he trusted that seeing by itself is already a form of refusal. This channel works the same way. There is no easy antidote. There is no prescription. There is diagnosis. There is the structure exposed. There is the system made visible. And once you see it, there is no way to pretend you did not see it. If this is the kind of lucidity that makes sense to you, subscribe, not to change, to see, because seeing already changes everything, even if you do not yet know what. Antidote Philosophy.